Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my Blacadian universe. So, I heard something and I got a new wrinkle on my brain, as they say, because it was absolutely mind bending and it really helped me sort of express in a very succinct way um, what I mean when I talk about. Um, Systems of oppression. So, one of the things that I do a lot in my work is try to explain, especially, um, to people that are new to concepts of, oppression, is try to explain it in a way, in different ways, because you never know which way it's going to be that's going to reach somebody. It could be, a book, it can be a movie, it can be a quote, it can be something that reaches them. So I always try to have a diverse way, like, just teaching of trying to reach people. And yeah, I was just amazed at how much this just sort of really put it into perspective for me. So let's talk about it. So, especially here in Canada, um, people deny racism a lot. And, it's one of the reasons I started this podcast because, I always share that, my girlfriends, um, and I and my friends talk about racism a lot. I was like, if you're going to be my friend, you're going to have to talk about my lived experience as a Black woman in this country, in Canada. And I experience, racism. It's not what you think racism is, what they teach us racism is. People aren't yelling at me in the streets here. It's people, just making assumptions about me, you know, othering me, all the things. So that's something people learn quite early on. Being my friend, white, black, doesn't matter. We talk about racism. Um, and I, so, yep. So here in Canada, one of the things that I find very interesting, because, we are taught a very specific history about how Canada was the savior of, the transatlantic slave trade. People came here through the Underground Railroad, and like all the streets were paved with gold and, whatever else. That's basically the short history that we're taught. And it's not unless you dig deeper. And I've been in rooms with people that don't dig deeper that they don't find out that, people went back to America, obviously to find family members, but also because they weren't getting treated well here. Just all the things, the racism that slavery did exist here. Just the history is so covered up. It's very positive. We love to compare ourselves. One of the things you need to know about Canadians is that we love to compare ourselves to Americans, and we love to say how much we did better than them, especially when it comes to the enslavement of Black people. We just love to say, oh, well, we're not them, so, look at us. Let's not look at our actual problems with racism. Um, and so, all that to say, it leads to a lot of people believing that racism is not, and it's particularly, I'm going to talk about anti-Black racism because it is the gravest crime in humanity. Um, See my previous episode, but it's because a lot of people believe that it's individual bad actors and not a system of oppression. They truly believe that they're a good person and therefore they cannot be racist. And so the system that really helps me, and I spend a lot of my time trying to explain to people that um, that's not the case. It's a system. And unless we are actively fighting against that system, that's what we mean when we talk about anti-racist, we have to be very, very intentional because it is literally all around us. We have to be very intentional about dismantling it and challenging it and eliminating it. That's the only way we can fight against it. Um, so when I say this, it's met with so much resistance. And so I'll get to the quote. So the quote that I heard, or the video I saw, I'll be sharing it with this podcast, is that basically it's very, 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 very easy to understand systems of oppression when it doesn't apply to Black people. And I thought, hell yeah. Sexism. If I talk to a white woman about sexism, she's jiving with it. She gets it. She's nodding. She's agreeing. She is all about it. Of course. Of course, these systems are all interconnected. All of these things, everything that we're told about our bodies and our, roles in society, all of these things. Yes, yes, the patriarchy, boo, all of it makes sense. It's the math is mathing when I talk about sexism. And if I say, now take all of that and apply the same thing to the enslavement of Black people. And when we talk about, redlining and, um, the poverty and the um, jobs and healthcare being, disproportionately stacked against, Black bodies for having positive outcomes, all the things that I just said that you were agreeing with. And as soon as I start putting it into context of racism, it's met with resistance, anger, and we're back to this individual notion of it's only individuals that can be racist. It can't be a system. And so I hope that you had that light bulb moment just now. If, you've been struggling to get that concept of how it isn't individual, it is systemic, is think of racism, think of sexism, excuse me, especially if you're a woman. You know what that feels like. You know that you don't have to explain to another person. You don't have to prove that it was sexist because your whole life is about understanding how to stay safe as a woman in this society that is exactly the same as it is about being a Black person in the society. I will not argue with anybody. When I say it's racist, just as it's so true. Believe women, believe Black people. It's the same, the equivalence. I mean, the math is mathing here. It's such a perfect, perfect parallel. So dive deep on that because honestly, QED. So, and then it makes me think, why? Why is it people are not able to make that connection? And I'll tell you why. It's so hard. I get it. I can empathize. You don't want to be the villain. Nobody wants to be the villain, especially when it comes to the gravest crime that's ever been committed in humanity. To believe that you and your ancestors were a part of that is an incredibly disturbing thought process. It would be very upsetting. If I were a white person, I would be pretty upset to think that that was, in my history, in my blood, in my family. It would be pretty gross. Nobody wants to think that of the people that they love. They don't want to think that about the person that they are somehow benefiting from a disgusting, inhumane practice. But the reality is that there are companies that are in existence today that were slave traders, and we just are living our lives like that's okay, that they shouldn't be allowed to exist. We should be dismantling them and shunning them, but the fact that we can, and my thoughts on plantation weddings, the fact that we can even have that exist is just because we're too afraid to challenge this. And so I get that, we talk a lot about protecting people's feelings, especially white people when it comes to this. And, it's, as they say, it's too damn bad. Uh, because if you had an issue with yourself, we would say the same thing we say to the men when it's about sexism is fix yourself, go to therapy, work through the issues, and challenge them head on. If you are not willing to do the work, then you do not deserve our empathy and sympathy. Face it. You cannot change what you do not face. The same is true for racism, just as it is with any problem that people are facing. You have to look inward. You have to look inward. And so, when I'm talking about this, and people are very quick to say, not all white people, just as like not all men, we need to understand just how ignorant that statement is when men say it, as the same when people that are outside of blackness say it as well. It is just as inappropriate to say it to somebody when they're experiencing it, sharing their story with you, or how you justify it to refuse to find it within yourself. It's there. And I'm telling you this not to accuse somebody to feel bad about it, but I'm telling you that it's there because our world was built for it to be there. And you need to work to get rid of it. That is how you become that good person. It's not by ignoring it. No problems are ever going to go away by ignoring it. You have to do the work to challenge yourself and fix it. Fix it. And I I will share a story that I always think of whenever I talk about, doing that work and your inward work. And, when we talk about dismantling and decolonizing our minds and doing that work, the anti-oppression work, I remember when I was in university, I took this class and it was fantastic. It was one of those things that just stays with you. It was about there was like these commercials at the time, like these old commercials, um, and it was about like I am Canadian. I think it was just actually in the news recently. I think it just turned like it's an anniversary. It was like 20 years. Anyways, at the time it was already like out for a while, but here in Canada they're pretty famous. People know what you're talking about when you're talking about it. And it was like this white guy. He was wearing like a flannel shirt, and he's just like a stereotypical lumberjack looking guy. Like, uh, I will keep my thoughts to myself on that. But, anyways, our very just a very stereotypical typical image of what you're supposed to think a Canadian looks like. Anyways, interestingly, I think the guy expressed some regret around it because, yeah. And I'm not gonna, and I don't want to have that like, oh, it was just the time then. No, it was racist then. As a black person then, I was like, what the hell am I looking at? That flannel, bleh. Uh, I guess I did talk about it more. Anyways, the point is that in our classroom, we went through things and we talked about issues like this, the things that we said in the mail, and just how it just very, it really helped shape my sociological mind because, like, it was, using examples like this, famous media examples, but also our teacher would just literally go on, like, look at the news and she would say, like, there's some things that I can point out in this thing that was written today. And I shared before, like, a child, they were talking about a child that was like missing, and she was Chinese. And then they said, like, she speaks English. And then they were like, why? She was obviously in a Canadian school, an elementary school. Um, you know, why do you think they needed to specify that she spoke English? Would they have specified it if it was a white child? And, it's just those kinds of examples are just so perfect because it really just, you know, focused on those kinds of just micro examples of racism. Anyways, so basically it came down to, if the white guy in the I Am Canadian commercials was like Asian, would we feel that he was Canadian? And that was just like that challenging. And I was like, as a black person who was Canadian, I would have thought, I was expecting, of course, I'm going boo to the commercial, but I, of course, would have had pause. I would have thought it, you know, really interesting. It would have made me think, oh, good for them. Like, it would have been a big deal if it was an Asian person saying, I am Canadian. I would have loved it. I'm sure it would have really made some people angry. Even though there's a long history of um, uh, Asian people in Canada, one of our biggest populations, by the way. And fastest growing, but it would have made people really angry, even if it was, statistically accurate. Um, and so those kinds of things were, and I was saying, like, me and my friend were in the front of that class. A lot of people went to the back after, by the way. We were like the only two people of color in the whole classroom. And we were like, oh my God, we have such racists. We're so racist. It was just really interesting to us that we were like so open. We were so open to challenging ourselves. We were so open to see that flaw and challenge it and eliminate it. But I'll tell you, the people that dropped out of that class, they were dropping like flies because they weren't willing to have that conversation with themselves, to challenge themselves in that way. That class got real small, real fast. I don't know if they thought because it was being taught by a white woman that she was just gonna, you know, stick to the usual script of, slavery was bad. It happened a long time ago. She was showing that it was very much alive and well and present in all of us. And the fact that nobody, almost nobody in that class, like, I think in a university class, usually, very big numbers. I think we were whittled down to maybe, it was like under 30 people, which is just unheard of at the time. And it was because a lot of people just couldn't hack it. And I feel it's very much the same right now, whereas nobody wants to challenge themselves. No one wants to look at themselves. No one wants to say those things about, I am racist. I've been taught to be racist. I've been taught to hate Black people. I've been taught those things. And if you're never going to say that, if you're never going to admit it, if you're not going to feel that you feel that, if you're not going to think those things, how are you ever going to stop? How are you really going to be the best version of yourself that you claim to be, that you want to be? If you want to be anti-racist, You're going to have to accept that they're there. Maybe you've done the work and you've already started going, but it's going to take a while because you need to challenge it. You need to see it every day. And it's one of those things that it gets easier and you don't have to be perfect. Never, ever, ever think that you have to be perfect in those systems. You're always learning, always learning. And if you have the power to challenge it within yourself and within others, do it because it is the right thing to do. And it's the only thing to do in these times, in these challenging times, because the only way out is through. The only way out is through. So I hope I gave everybody a new wrinkle on their brain. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time.